Doug Ford has followed through with his threat to charge U.S. customers 25% more for electricity. And the premier is again threatening he could cut off electricity altogether to the 3 states bordering Ontario. The opposition leader wants him to go even further, while Ford says it could be time for Alberta to get involved. Queen's Park reporter Lorenda Redekop has more on this latest shot in the trade war.
Premier Doug Ford had threatened a 25% surcharge on electricity to the U.S. Today, he did it, and it may be just a first step.
Let me be clear. I will not hesitate to increase this charge. If necessary, if the United States escalates, I will not hesitate to shut the electricity off completely.
Ontario Electricity powers up to 1.5 million homes and businesses in the U.S. Ford expects it to bring in up to $400,000 a day, with the money going to people and businesses affected by tariffs.
I do not want to do this. I feel terrible for the American people because it's not the American people who started this trade war. It's one person who's responsible. That's President Trump.
Ontario sells electricity to 3 different U.S. states, Minnesota, Michigan, and New York. Then they sometimes sell it on to other states, meaning the impact could also be felt elsewhere.
We're dealing with a narcissistic egomaniac as president of the United States right now. The only way to fight back is through leverage. We've got to inflict pain in order for it to get his attention.
Some U.S. politicians from states affected have responded through social media. New York's governor saying they won't allow President Trump to play politics with their economy while New Yorkers foot the bill. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz saying his state can't afford it and we have to put an end to this madness. However, both are Democrats, not Trump allies. Here in Ontario, the opposition leader wants the province to go further.
My concern here is where can we hit back and hit back hard? Why aren't we looking at things like the contracts that this government signed with Staples, with Walmart, with the U.S. companies that are managing our Ontario Works and ODSP?
The premier says he's directed the Secretary of Cabinet to look into contracts.
To use a fine-tooth comb on any contracts that we have.
He says it's the premier of Alberta who could really inflict pain on the U.S. with an export tax on oil and gas.
That will instantly change the game. Instantly, when the Americans, and I know the Americans, all of a sudden their gas prices go up 90 to $1 a gallon, they will lose their minds.
However, Premier Danielle Smith shot that down, calling it an absurd and self-destructive idea. Meanwhile, Premier Ford says the electricity surcharge will remain as long as there's a threat of U.S. tariffs. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Mark Carney is expected to take over from Prime Minister Trudeau in a matter of days following his landslide win on Sunday to become the 14th leader of the Liberal Party. The former 2-time central banker will be coming into the role of PM as a federal election looms. Ashley Burke has more on what it means for the party, with Canadians expected to head to the polls very soon.
Mr. Carney, when will there be an election?
Fresh off the heels of his landslide victory, Mark Carney on Parliament Hill to discuss what comes next.
The transition between the Prime Minister and myself, that transition will be seamless and it will be quick.
On day 1 as Liberal leader, Carney meeting with the Prime Minister, then his caucus.
I'm really happy today that a new era is starting.
I think the party is rejuvenated, re-energized.
Wayne Long, the first MP who publicly called on Justin Trudeau to resign, says he's now among the MPs Carney convinced to run again in the next election.
He said, look, you could be a part of my team. I would like you to reconsider offerings.
Carney's gearing up to send Canadians to the polls, trying to build on the momentum he saw last night after handedly winning the leadership race with almost 86% of the vote.
Donald Trump is trying to weaken our economy. But there's someone else who, if he succeeds, will weaken our economy. It's Pierre Poilievre.
Carney's never held public office before and is facing an uphill battle. The Conservatives are still leading in the polls, and Canada's in a trade war. Trudeau's former principal secretary helped with Carney's campaign.
I think the country could use an election, frankly. I think the country could use a government with a strong mandate to negotiate with Donald Trump.
Liberals say they're ready to jump into a quick election.
We have signs in storage and they're always ready, and the volunteers in our riding have been working hard for the last number of years.
I am ready for an election in Beaches East York, and I think we got a fair fighting chance.
The Conservatives already taking aim at Carney, attacks that are expected to ramp up.
I think the Conservatives are resorting to the kind of dirty personal politics that Mr. Poilievre has been known for since he was in cabinet with Stephen Harper.
Mark Carney has named former cabinet minister Marco Mendicino as his chief of staff for his transition. Carney is expected to take office and swear in his cabinet this week. Then sources say he's aiming to trigger an election before Parliament was set to resume at the end of the month, with a vote in late April or early May. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
Following Carney's win, we spoke with people here in our city reacting to Trudeau's replacement.
I think the Liberal Party and past governments have not really paid attention a lot, or maybe has spent too much when you look at fiscal policy in the past, and I think that might be his biggest challenge when you look at sectors that might be hit by the tariffs coming from Trump.
I feel like this is a natural thing. This is a good thing for Canada to have a good leader, really know economics and understand how to interact with the international leaders and get the things move on. I think this is good, positive things for Canada.
Carney will officially become Prime Minister when he's sworn in by Governor General Mary Simon. Premier Doug Ford and a city councillor are condemning the mass shooting in Scarborough on Friday night. Toronto police are still looking for 3 suspects who opened fire at a pub, injuring 12 people. Chris Glover has more on why politicians are worried this is an escalation in the city's tow truck turf war.
Remnants of the police crime scene remain even after investigators clear the Piper Arms pub by the Scarborough Town Centre. Friday night, 3 masked suspects burst in and started shooting, injuring 12 people. The pub was celebrating its grand opening when the shots rang out.
The level of disregard for life and liberty of someone just being out and to enjoy themselves is just absolutely asinine.
Councillor Michael Thompson says sources in the community are telling him the ownership of the pub is connected to the tow truck industry, and the shooting is linked to the ongoing tow truck turf war.
I don't have all the information, but we're looking to explore what's actually going on and so on, because this is my community and we're concerned about the safety of the community.
In recent months, there's been a wave of shootings linked to Toronto's towing industry. Just last Tuesday, 2 men were shot outside a tow yard in the city's West End. Then an hour later, a tow truck driver got shot at a gas station in Scarborough.
These guys just looked at the crowd and opened fire. It was horrible.
With this latest incident, police say they've reviewed video evidence of the shooting, but so far haven't confirmed whether the tow truck turf war is the motive.
We're open to that, but we're not sure yet.
These tow truck drivers, a message to you, it has to come to an end.
Premier Doug Ford promising a crackdown is coming to help the OPP better police the tow truck industry that Ford says is made up of mostly good people.
There's a few bad apples, but those apples we're going to catch, and they're going into the slammer.
What do local governments do to try to prevent this from happening when it seems to be so widespread?
Well, I mean, it's a bit of a cancer in the community, right? And so the question is, who is safe? And are we safe? And if we're not safe, what are we doing to address that?
The councillor says ending the tow truck violence is a priority for city officials too. But as police continue to investigate, officers say no weapons have been recovered and they still have no description of the suspects on the run. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
The U of T trash team releasing its 2024 results today that shows it collected over 600 kilos of trash from Toronto's waterways. The project first launched in 2019, and last year, the team partnered with a U.S. company to develop an international data sharing app. As Dale Monuktuk explains, the information gathered is being used to inform policy.
We're not far away from boats and other watercraft jetting around Lake Ontario. People, too. And also ready to take a dip, these sea bins.
So the sea bin is a floating trash bin. So it
basically bobs up and down on the surface of the water. Water gets filtered through this catch basin, and this mesh can capture debris as small as 2 millimeters.
That's just one of 4 ways Ports Toronto and the University of Toronto trash team tracked and trapped floatables last year. There's also good old-fashioned skimming, 10 litter traps, and waste sharks, remote-controlled aqua drones.
They act a bit like a whale shark, so they'll skim the top surface of the water, collect floating debris in a waste bin, and then they're brought out to be emptied. So those are pretty neat.
In 2024, the traps collected a total of 652 kilos of litter from the waterfront.
This included over 100,000 small plastic pieces and more than 53,000 large pieces like cutlery, cups, spoons, that type of thing.
Litter can have devastating impacts on local wildlife. The litter is coming from a variety of places, from the Don River or from storm drains. It can even travel from a construction site, like in this Life of a Pellet video from the trash team.
I need to get back to the factory, or I'll never become a car part.
The most prevalent item globally were cigarette butts, followed by beverage bottles, bottle caps, food wrappers, grocery bags. So these are all the top items are consumer products, though we can't really speak to what the source would be.
Britta Batchelor is with the US-based Ocean Conservancy, which together with the U of T trash team launched a new version of the Clean Swell app that collects and shares trash trap data.
And that database is essentially global monitoring. So local groups like ours can use it for local monitoring to inform local solutions.
Past data has helped inform the single-use plastic policy in Canada, policies regarding filters on washing machines, and others. The trash traps go back in the water this spring. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
The Buy Canadian movement has been gaining popularity ever since President Trump announced his tariffs on Canadian goods. But it's not just everyday consumers jumping on board. Numerous restaurants have committed to sourcing only local ingredients. Alicia San catches up with one Toronto pizza shop owner to see how that's going.
This is a batch I just did. This is one of the experimental batches with a whole grain.
So far, Graham Palmetier of Graham's Pizza has been able to swap out American ingredients for Canadian ones at his Junction Triangle pizza shop.
It's been a fairly seamless switch, and prices haven't really been affected that much. I haven't had to change prices or anything.
Canadian mozzarella, canned tomatoes, and Canadian pop all stocked in the fridges, since he's publicly committed to sourcing Canadian products. Via press conference with the mayor earlier this month, he's had Canadian flour producers sending him samples wanting to be his pick for Graham's pizza dough. But he's also had random people sending him phony reviews.
Like one guy was, mentioning vaccines and the war in Ukraine, and I was just talking about buying Canadian local stuff.
Palmetier has been on the BBC, CNN, all for his pizza joint going Canadian. He's able to laugh about it because
feedback's been overwhelmingly positive, except for the occasional online troll.
So we've seen restaurants switching to Canadian ingredients and cafes swapping Americanos for Canadianos. The Buy Canadian movement is here, but is it moving the needle yet?
With respect to grocery, it's one of the hardest hit items on the list of retaliatory tariffs. Those obviously are pending, and so that could be an issue for affordability.
Since most Canadian grocery store shelves are 70% Canadian product, the Retail Council of Canada says you can usually swap an American item for a Canadian one, but there are exceptions.
You can't obviously get Canadian grown coffee. You can't get Canadian grown bananas, avocados, orange juice, and so forth. But there is a fair bit of substitutability, so I would expect to see it bite there first.
Even the controversial pineapple at Graham's Pizza is a Canadian brand, with the pineapples coming from Thailand. As for all the attention this has gotten,
I'm excited for the media to go away for a bit, no offense.
No, I'll be back for a slice of pizza. Maybe not an interview, because perhaps eventually sourcing Canadian ingredients will become a norm, not necessarily newsworthy. Alicia San, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Several Toronto-based taxi companies are calling on the city to include them in its new Buy Canadian campaign. City Council recently passed a motion to develop a comprehensive plan to urge Torontonians to support local companies in response to Trump's tariffs. Greg Ross has more.
Taxi drivers and the companies they drive for in the city want Torontonians to know they are Canadian.
Every taxi you see is a small, independently licensed business in this city, in this country. And so I do think if we're talking about supporting local Canadian businesses, small businesses in particular, this is the perfect opportunity.
Christine Hubbard is the operations manager at Beck Taxi. They have joined 3 other Toronto-based taxi companies in urging the city to do more to support them and their drivers.
Let's stop, supporting these giant tech companies who are siphoning money out of our country.
She's referring to app-based ride-sharing companies like Uber and Lyft that operate in Toronto.
Uber Canada is run by Canadians for Canadians.
Uber Canada spokesperson Keithana Rank says their drivers and delivery people are also Canadians.
There are 180,000 drivers and delivery people who earn money on Uber in this country. They live, they work, they spend in this country.
She says they also support a number of Toronto-based charities. But Hubbard says it's difficult for drivers and delivery people on these apps to earn a living.
When you use the Uber app, you might pay $30, the driver's getting $12, and the rest is going out of our country.
Hi, Donald John Trump.
She says it's even more troubling when you consider at least one of the companies supported President Donald Trump, who is responsible for the tariffs.
Just for his inauguration fund, Uber as a company donated $1 million. Their CEO donated an additional $1 million.
Uber did also give $1 million to Joe Biden in 2021 for his inauguration.
You're traveling to Ottawa or Montreal so far.
People in Toronto may not know that Beck Taxi also has its own ride-sharing app that works in a similar fashion to Uber and Lyft apps.
It looks very similar, but it is, for Canada, a made-in-Toronto company. This is what shopping local and supporting local means.
A representative for the mayor's office told CBC News that the city is closely examining vehicle-for-hire services, and they have sent a ride-share licensing plan back to staff for review. Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
The toll of Trump's trade war is hitting Point Roberts, a small Washington community just south of Vancouver. Cut off by the border, it relies on Canada for 90% of its economy, but tariffs are chilling relations. Yvette Brend reports.
U.S. and Canadian citizens have been intertwined in Point Roberts for more than 100 years. Many Canadians come here for cheap gas, groceries, or the seaside. But the trade war has slowed that traffic to a trickle, cutting border crossings almost in half.
If I don't do well in the next few months here, I might have to close my doors. It's very sad.
Cafe manager Ailish Wallace says U.S. tariffs have turned off tourists.
Sad, angry, frustrated. Hopeful that, it'll turn itself around and we won't have this continued stress and pressure.
The trade war has slowed investment and building. So her husband, a contractor, is forced to leave his family and head to Hawaii, where he can earn a living by helping rebuild after fires there.
We want to keep our home.
We can't do without Canada's support. We won't exist.
This man is fighting for the community his grandmother settled in. He's petitioning Canada to exempt Point Roberts from any retaliatory taxes or tariffs.
And 90% of our economic activity comes from British Columbia. 90%. Take that away and say we're not coming to Point Roberts anymore. We're done. We're done.
This community relies on Canada for business, electricity, even water. The community is so Canadian-friendly, gas is sold by the liter. Pandemic restrictions hit Point Roberts hard. Tariffs for some may be the final blow.
It's all Canadians who are buying the gas.
Canadian Bob Cook acknowledges the tension.
People in Canada are outraged. They feel like they've been attacked, and they're just furious.
But he says he's still standing by his neighbor.
I'm not going to boycott Point Roberts. These are my friends here.
So he's doing what he can to push back on the paradigm shift by showing up for old friends. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Point Roberts, Washington.
All right, Chris Potter joining us now with a check on the forecast. And Chris, it's like we're getting a preview of spring this week.
Yeah, 100%. There's one outlier, Kelda, and that would be Wednesday. We do cool off a little bit into Wednesday, but the cool down doesn't continue. It actually starts to reverse, and we get back into the warmer winds swiftly, and you're definitely going to notice the end of this we'll call it traditional work week, almost the end of March break. That's when temperatures begin to climb again. So here's how things are working across the nation. Atlantic Canada right now, dry. Our system currently moving through the upper Great Lakes will continue to migrate northeastward. It will have an impact on Atlantic Canada as we get through Tuesday night and into Wednesday. Our share of the active weather from this feature, very minimal. The cold front will continue to migrate through southern Ontario. Ahead of it, we have the warmer southwesterly winds. Behind it, the cooler northwesterly winds. So that's all it's going to do. Cold front, like its name suggests, gives us a cool down. But speaking of the temperatures, normal daytime high for this time of year is close to 3 degrees. The record high, we didn't quite hit that. Daytime highs today were around 11 degrees for Toronto, 4 in Ottawa, and Windsor broke a record peaking at 17 degrees. In terms of the active weather right now, we're in the warmer winds, the warm sector of our system as it continues to build across the upper Great Lakes. So we will remain dry and mild through the overnight, dry and mild through the day tomorrow. We do have that passing cloud moving through the region very rapidly during the midday hours. After that, temperatures will kind of slowly start to fall. So we'll likely hit our daytime high tomorrow around 12, maybe 1 p.m., and then the temperatures back off. Through Tuesday night and into Wednesday, we will still hold on to a decent amount of cloud, despite the fact that high pressure is trying to work its way in. But with the cloud cover, there's not really a significant chance for any active weather. I can't rule out a couple of rogue wet flurries here and there, but other than that, it's just cloudy conditions with limited sunny breaks during the afternoon. As we step forward into the day on your Thursday, lots of sunshine and just some scattered high-level cloud. That wispy cirrus moving through usually indicates warmer air moving into a region, and once again, that's exactly what we're expecting. Overnight lows across southern Ontario, a little bit cooler up towards the Ottawa Valley at -1. Basically, temperatures are in the low to mid-single digits for overnight lows, which is higher than the normal daytime highs this time of year, and that will translate again to a warmer than average day across the region with daytime highs basically anywhere from 8 to almost 15 degrees depending on your locale. For the Toronto forecast, 6 degrees for tomorrow morning with increasing clouds, decreasing clouds through the afternoon. I have daytime highs around 9 to 10. It all depends on how quickly we change those wind directions. If they're still southerly past the midday hours, we'll likely peak at around 10 to 11, but I have a modest 9 degrees, still not bad. 0 degrees for us on Wednesday, 7 for Thursday, 11 for Friday, and 15 for Saturday with showers for the afternoon, Kelda, and then rain for Sunday.
But 15 degrees, wow. Thanks so much, Chris.
You got it.
And that is our show for you tonight. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night, everyone.